You are listening to the Empowering Working Moms podcast, Real Talk with Dr. Prianca Naik, a show to help professional moms in survival mode to take hold of their lives and thrive. If you're ready to take powerful action to create your best life, then this is the show for you. I'm your host, Dr. Prianca Naik, board-certified internal medicine physician and certified life coach. Now let's get to it and dive in. You are listening to the Empowering Working Moms podcast, episode number 7. Hello. Thank you so much for joining me again today. I'm so happy to have you here. Today, I'm going to talk about a topic that I think comes up a lot with type A women, and that is the concept of failure. And I really want to talk about this because I think that so many of us, we want to be successful in our careers. We want people to know how capable and smart we are. And if we admit to anything that we failed at potentially, what does that mean? So the reason I'm talking about this is because I'm going to tell you that there's actually really no such thing as failure. So even though we've been conditioned to pass exams, or let's say if we fail an exam when we get less than 70%, it doesn't really mean anything. Failing is really a label that we or society creates, but it's really just a concept that it's not really a fact, right? I know passing exams or doing well, not failing, is so ingrained in physicians and professions where you have to take multiple exams, let's say to maintain certification or maintain your degree. But the truth is, even though we're conditioned to believe that we need a passing grade and that there is such a thing as failure, there actually really isn't. There are lessons and growth from mistakes that you believed you made. Got that? Lessons and growth. I don't even know actually if there's any such thing as a mistake, because whatever we decide, it brings to us the necessary place that often leads to the next step in our lives. I'll tell you, I'm not a fan of the word because women often see themselves as failures. Failures as a mother, failures as a wife, failures in people-pleasing, or maybe even failing ourselves. I want to give you a story on my own personal failure, when I believed that that actually was a thing. Going to an Ivy League school is very much an Indian aspiration, or at least that's how I knew it. With all the Indian people I knew in my family or bragging at Indian parties. I went to a competitive private high school where unfortunately I lost all confidence, gave up studying, gave up my spot to an Ivy League school in doing so. I got into WashU in St. Louis, a respectable school, but it was a big failure in my family. The word failure was thrown around throughout my 20s. It was ingrained in me and really shot my belief in myself and my self-esteem. Undergrad was rocky. My college counselor said I probably didn't have a chance of getting into medical school. I was half-assing it in college when I was taking my pre-med classes, but after I graduated, I made a decision. I decided I was going to make medical school happen. So I took a few years off to fix my MCAT and my grades. I ended up getting into 3 U.S. MD schools against all odds. I'm bringing this up because I want to point out that this so-called failure and misstep was what allowed me to realize that I can do anything I put my mind to. I'm not saying this to brag. I'm saying it because I want you to know, so can you. Women can do anything. Those of us who have housed and birthed babies, we know that childbirth is insanely rough. So if we can do that and nurture little people, then we can certainly do anything. This idea that I can do anything I put my mind to, this realization that I had in my 20s, this was before I even knew what mindset was. This event in my life paved the way for where I am today. Whether people around me believed in me or not, whether or not it seemed strange, I had the guts to leave full-time medicine and launch my coaching business. There is no way I could have done this if I didn't believe that I can do anything I put my mind to. This major move to make a career change was a result of my so-called failure. I am grateful for this failure. Hence, I don't really believe in failure, just opportunities for growth, strength building, and change. Another benefit of this so-called failure, I now understand the value of believing in myself. Especially in today's world, when there are so many interesting careers that people can choose from, the climate is very different now from how it was when we were growing up. Becoming a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or an accountant or going into finance, they're not the only career choices. No matter what our children do, they do need to believe in themselves. And my own lack of belief and where it led me, initially at least, that gave me the perspective to make sure that my children won't have this problem. At least from my end and the part that I can control. So, this failure, the one that I talked about, of going to WashU, not doing well, having trouble getting into med school, well, it truly enriched my experience. And it is enriching my experience as a parent because I can help my kids with this unique perspective that I have. I'll give another example of perceived failure. Sometimes when we decide to undo a commitment, let's say, as in maybe when we were children and we wanted to quit a sport or an activity that we weren't super into, our parents wouldn't allow us to quit. Maybe as adults, we feel the same way, like we're not supposed to quit our job, even if it's toxic, or quit our marriage. And then we feel like failures. So the topic of divorce, let's go there. People often feel like they fail in marriage when they get divorced. But what if divorce and the lessons learned from a prior relationship create resilience, strength, and knowledge that a person can carry forward? They can carry forward with them that information as they proceed in life, in their next relationship. Maybe this divorce is the gateway to a healthier relationship and a better partner, a better match. So then technically, it's not really a failure. See, it's really all about how we frame things. Our perceived failures can be our life's teachers. So how can we change our relationship with failure? Well, we can shift our perspective. We can shift our mindset. We can decide that we are always learning and growing and changing. We are exactly where we're meant to be in any given moment, even if that might feel really difficult at the time. We can decide to stop labeling our actions as failures or ourselves as failures. This is yet another step in finding inner peace and fulfillment. Here are some tips on making peace with the concept of failure. We have to stop trying to be perfect. This will lower our insane standards. I practice this a lot when there's a small mess here or there. It doesn't necessarily have to be cleaned up right this moment, and it's really not significant in the scheme of things. Furthermore, there is no such thing as being perfect when you're human. To err is to be human, and we are inherently imperfect by nature. So we really need to learn that concept and accept it. By understanding that making errors and mistakes is human nature, there will be automatically less to fail at. Along with this, we really have to let go. Sweating the small stuff is a waste of time. I will tell you that recently I hired a new virtual assistant company to help me with my podcast and other parts of my business. And one of the VAs went in and changed my website without asking me. I cannot find an old copy of my website, which I really liked before. I got a little upset about it. I was getting frustrated. And then I talked to myself and said, all right, it doesn't matter in the scheme of things what your website looks like. People don't care. Why do you? It doesn't matter. It's a small concept. I couldn't control what happened to my website. I had no control over restoring it. And it was just something I had to let go. Because we cannot control anything outside of ourselves. We must relinquish our onus of anything outside of us. In Buddhism, suffering is due to attachment. So the more we attach ourselves or attach meaning to things, the more suffering we cause ourselves. But if we can let go, we can most certainly decrease our suffering and our pain. Another way to make peace with failure is acceptance. Resistance causes so much grief. We must accept what we cannot change and only change what we can, which is really within ourselves. We must give ourselves grace. We got to give ourselves grace and take it easy, as hard as that may be. So many issues we treat as do or die. And they're often not. Aside from death and grave illness, shit's just not that serious, so we must try to lighten up. Taking ownership of our decisions, thoughts, actions as well, that can help us make peace with perceived failures. We can ask ourselves, why did this happen? What is this obstacle creating for me? What is the consequence of this? How am I benefiting from this seemingly bad or failure-ridden situation? Gabby Bernstein has a book called The Universe Has My Back. And honestly, I thought it was cheesy and I never really understood what it meant. I no longer think it's cheesy. I now interpret the title as realizing that certain things in our lives, like perceived failures, occur in order to teach us something or help us grow, or lead us to where we are supposed to go. When we start shifting the way we see things, we can find true inner peace and happiness. Take it from me, a recovering pessimist. I remember in the distant past, I used to describe myself as a pessimist because I wanted to be a realist. I didn't want to be delusional. I didn't want to have false hope in things that might never happen. Well, today I would describe myself as the complete opposite. So all the labels that we have for ourselves, everything that we think we are, there is room to change. We can transform completely into anyone we want to be. And I suggest using your perceived failures as lessons for growth to get you where you want to be. If you want to learn to shift what is going on in your brain, to stop beating yourself up, to stop feeling like a failure, then let's talk. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you next week. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Empowering Working Moms podcast, Real Talk with Dr. Prianca Naik. If you are ready to get unstuck and out of survival mode to live your best life, I want to invite you to book a free 30-minute consultation call with me. To get started, visit priancanaikmdcoaching.as.me. Link in the show notes.